In particular, there was a great leader named Atlant, and he had a wife named Caratide, and they founded the continent that would be called Atlantis. Caratide's father's name was Muras, M-U-R-A-S, and through him they founded a city called Mu, which was located, the central city, in the Gobi Desert. The city of Mu had two underground cities, Agharta I and Agharta II, which had tunnels built between them, and that was the central seat of power for Mu. Mu and Atlantis both had their own colonizations all over the planet and sprung up all over the place. But they lived peacefully for many thousands of years, actually about 18,000 years. And then about that time, certain factions grew up in both of their societies, which were beginning to cause problems and causing one person against another. And after all these years of peace, strife broke out. There were some factions of war beginning. The governments at hand, the Atlantean and the Mu governments, would not stand for this war breaking out, and those who were attempting to cause the wars, they drove them out of town, literally. But in this case, they drove them off the planet. Well, these people left in large amounts. There was an exodus of those warlike people. They left, and I'm told they went to the Barnard Star. Some of the others may have split off and gone to different areas, but that's where the major amount of them went. 2,000 years went by where there was again peace between Atlantis and Mu and the cities of Earth. We're back to about 13,000 years now, back from our time. That's the time frame where we're at. At that point, those people who had left had built up on their own planet, the ones that were exiled. Their race had escalated and become very ruthless and very warlike. They then had a leader named Arus, A-R-U-S. They decided to return to Earth. Arus must have been quite a guy, because it says in their folklore that he was thought of as the barbarous one. He also had a strong following, had a couple hundred leaders behind him, similar to Pelagon, that were very high in the sciences and the arts. They settled in the high north country, it says, and in the area we now call Florida. In these two areas, and proceeded to start small wars again against Atlantis and Mu. One interesting fact, though, if you take the globe of Earth and look at it, and look where Florida is now. Now, if you take your hands and roll it over to where Florida moves up to the north, where Greenland is now, that's the position that the planet was in at that time. So just roll the planet over so Florida moves up farther north and up to that northern area where Greenland now is, and that's the position where things were actually at. That puts the area where Atlantis was, which was the large landmass between South America and Africa, that moves it up farther north, where it's north of the equator then. Okay, more on the line almost with where America is now. So you can see that the planet was in a different position. What happened was war finally eventually did break out, that Eris and his people caused a great war to break out. There was a major war that happened between Atlantis and Mu, and that ended actually in one day. It was such a short war. They had such high technology. Just to give you a brief idea of what happened, on the history tapes that I have, this goes into much larger detail, and there's a much longer explanation all about the history and these things, but I don't have time for here. So you could listen to that if you're interested in more. But ultimately what happened was the Atlanteans, who had a large number of ships, a very large army of spacers, started an assault against Mu in the morning. And apparently within about 20 minutes' time, with these some sort of dissolving ray energy beams they immediately, almost immediately, annihilated the city of Mu. Now, the people of Mu were thought of as scientifically being more advanced than Atlanteans, but they didn't have the number of spacers, and apparently they really weren't prepared for the immediate attack. And the Atlanteans caught them by surprise and wiped Mu out almost instantly, like I say, within about 20 minutes' time. Unknown to the people of Atlantis, as they were back celebrating and cheering their immediate victory, they had just wiped out millions of their friends. The people of Mu, the scientists of Mu, who had been expecting a war, had taken a large group of their people, flown out into space in the area where the asteroid belt is, and found rather large chunks of the old planet Milano, which is what the debris of the asteroid belt is made up out of. They took one very large asteroid that was floating out there that was several miles in diameter, and they actually, by hooking some sort of engines or ships to that asteroid, propelled it towards Earth. They then propelled this large asteroid and smashed it right into Atlantis. When it hit, it actually didn't hit Atlantis. It exploded when it hit the atmosphere several miles above the land. But when it exploded, it ignited and blew up the atmosphere. It caused the ocean floor to crack open, and that's why Atlantis sunk down to the ocean floor. The air, the atmosphere of Earth was just black smoke and ruin for, I think, something like 40 years. It threw us off our axis and caused the rotation of the planet to actually change. So it was a rather disastrous war and wiped out just about everything. There was hardly any life left on the planet. Eris and his people survived. Most of the people who survived from Atlantis and moved from the different cities fled to get away from the wars and the evil tyranny of Eris and took off back to the Pleiades, Vega, Barnard's Star, or other friendly places. When the dust had settled, so to speak, Eris, an Ishwish who has an expected life expectancy of over 3,000 years, was still alive, along with all of his followers. They had taken Earth. Well, there weren't too many people, though, to rule over. There was the then developing Earth human beings that were left here, and just the people that had followed Eris, and hardly anybody left from Atlantis and moved, because the destruction was so wide-felt.